Maybe I should take all those pictures out. Do this.
Yeah, go ahead. Take it off if you want. I just have it rolling right now, so I don't have to worry about it.
Alright, bet.
Want me to get you flossing too?
Gotta stay clean.
Flossing out here.
Alright, you know what you want to ask?
It'd be a general conversation, but I'll start out just asking about like how you got started and stuff.
You don't want
What
to.
your company does, what you do.
You don't want to have a list of questions.
No, normally, like, I've liked how when I have questions, it feels weird. You know what I mean? It makes it feels like I'm not actually engaging in the conversation. It feels like it's more like, and how did blah blah blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how's everybody doing? Welcome to the McCove Mindset Podcast. My name is Kevin McCove. Today we have with us Ryan Nach from Knock It Out Music, very dear friend of mine, long colleague. Ryan, why don't you tell us what it is that you and your company does?
How y'all doing? My name is Ryan Nach. My company is Knock It Out Music. I'm the executive producer and I'm also a composer. We create original music and scores for commercials, television, and all kinds of digital media. So all the background music that you don't really pay attention to, but you are subtly absorbing in a way that you don't even realize. That's what we do.
So how'd you get into the world of like music licensing, everything that you do? How'd you get into it?
So I started out by creating a lot of tracks for hip-hop artists, dance acts, pop acts, and it was my friend actually, we were doing a lot of hip-hop freestyles in my basement, and I was recording his tracks as an MC doing live freestyle battles across the internet at a time when it was just sort of internet rap and battle rap was really starting to become a thing. And eventually when I went off to college, I ended up starting my own label and producing artists over there. And that kind of evolved into producing soundscapes and scores for all kinds of TV shows and ads and digital media. Somewhere in there, I don't want to jump the gun too much, but some things happened where I was able to pay the bills for a little while before I eventually reinvested into my music career.
So what, for a lot of people listening to my podcast, the point of it is I'm really trying to bring value to people who are trying to figure out, hey, how can I do this and only this? And you're one of the people who have managed to figure out a way to just make music and only do that. And so I'm sure that I would wonder, like, hey, how did you go from producing for artists to getting music into TV? And, like, what did it even start out with when you were just producing music for artists? Like, did people pay you for beats? Like, were you making money that way? How was it working?
Yeah, so really I never really made anything more than a couple $100 in terms of just hustling beats for, singers and rappers. I was mostly just giving the tracks away and just working with, my homies at the time. It wasn't until someone turned me on to the world of sync, which is music for picture, music for television and ads, video content, that I realized, like, oh, there's some money here. There's a world here that I didn't even know that existed, and ultimately I took advantage of a connection that I had to an ad agency head who gave me a fluke opportunity to score a couple of pharmaceutical jingles, and so for a while I was an accountant. That's what I studied in school, and so during the day I'd be calculating quarterly tax payments for my accounting clients, and then I'd run to the bathroom stall to take the phone call from the creative director at the ad agency, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, I have those demos for you by the morning. And that went on for like a good month. Basically moonlighting. I'd be at my desk, I'd run home, be cranking out music till 4 in the morning, go to work the next day all tired, sleep in my car, and that went on for about a month. And eventually these two spots ran, and when I saw what they paid, I said, shit, if I could do 10 of these a year, I could leave my job and, make what I was making in accounting. I didn't realize how hard it was to be, get 10 jobs a year. It's a thing a lot of people fight hard over. So did a little bit of research and eventually left my job and started freelancing with some other music companies. And the future of it, a lot of the older guys were getting out and they were like, the future of this for you is don't be the individual composer, be the company. And so I kind of took that model. I put partners around me who were stronger where I was weak. If they were good at rock, I was like, oh, this is a good symbiotic relationship because I'm good at hip hop. If they were good at jazz, great. Let's how can we trade resources? How can we collaborate? And put enough people around me where we can service all kinds of different types of projects.
So if I were trying to get into this world, like how would I even get in? If I were like, yo, I'm producing for some friends, or I'm on Instagram and I have my beats up, and sometimes people hit me up and they ask if they can sing to a beat or rap to a beat or whatever. How do I go from that to placing my music in an ad or placing my music in a commercial?
As a singer or as a composer, producer, or either?
I think either. Yeah, but let's just go from the production world since that's like the world that you know.
Sure. So, I mean, there's, a number of different ways you can place your music. I would say there's what's called music houses. These are big commercial companies that maybe have, few guys on staff, could be 10 guys, and a whole lot of freelancers, and they are, requesting people and commissioning people to create custom scores, 30-second pieces, 15-second pieces of music on demand that are synced up to a particular video. Like, oh, here's the Audi commercial. Here's the Audi. It's going down the street. When it speeds up, we want the music to speed up. When it slows down, we want this to slow down. So you could start by, trying to get the work from those kinds of companies. You could go and try to place your tracks with music publishers. Companies like Cobalt or Concord Music, BMG, or any of the major publishers. I mean, these are companies that will probably give you some kind of advance if you're lucky, for a group of songs, and until you're able to pay off that advance with the royalties generated from, your sync placements. I think that's a little bit more of a, long-term shot. You could also put your tracks into music libraries. My partner has a music library called the Qniverse, and we were able to partner over the years. His name is Wellington Laura, a great guy. Other companies like Killer Tracks, and these are companies that are placing your tracks into TV, into web commercials, and all different kinds of media, but as a standalone, pre-existing track. So you could research just music library tracks, and everything is on a non-exclusive basis. So you could take the same track. It's kind of shunned down upon by some companies, but you could take the same tracks from one company and retitle them and give them to another company.
Why does that look down upon?
It really depends upon each individual company. It really creates. It's more of a bureaucratic, administrative mess for the libraries themselves, because let's say, I have a track called Kevin McCove Night, and you put it with Killer Tracks, or you put it with with Qniverse, and then there's another company called Jingle Punks, and you give it the same track, Kevin McCove Night, to Jingle Punks, and now both companies, or your track gets placed in Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and now Keeping Up with the Kardashians has to give somebody credit for placing the track, and both companies, were placing the tracks. Now, they have to say, well, shit, who do we pay? Kevin McCove gave Night. Kevin McCove gave both Kevin McCove Night to Jingle Punks and Killer Tracks. So who do we pay? Right. Without getting into the complicated process of, is it from ASCAP, etc. So I'd say just really the element of exclusivity. It's looked down upon because it. In general, if you're you want to look at your material as premium, you don't want it to be in a million places. You want You want it to be with one person. And I'd say for the more exclusive material that maybe you believe in, maybe you think, like a big songwriter or a big singer or an artist is going to pick it up, you might enter into an exclusive arrangement with a publisher, like you and I have done with some of our material, and shop it that way, as you think that it might have a higher, chance of hitting in the marketplace.
Right. So like for me hearing that makes me say like, oh wow, like there are all these different companies and there's different libraries or different publishers, and I can't take one of my songs and put them in a whole bunch of different places. How do you compete with, how do you produce enough volume? How do you make enough tracks to be like, well, let me put some here, let me get some here, and do you suggest having this high volume where you're trying to put it everywhere, or working with one company, or having a small volume but just like really concentrated work?
Yeah, and the answer is it depends. There's really no rule when it comes to this shit. I mean, it's really the Wild West. If you're again, I'm not really going to talk about, unless you want me to talk about, singers trying to put their stuff out there.
Well, there might be singers listening. So.
There might be singers, so that I really should start to give them some love. I really feel for them, because it's very difficult for them to make it as a demo singer. I mean, I know that because we work on things and you just don't see the kind of action, just because there's more of a market for instrumental tracks.
Right.
They sit underneath the voiceover and give an emotional soundscape to whatever the material is, whatever the media is, because there's usually somebody speaking in it, and it's hard to it's easier for them to speak over something, or
that doesn't have another voice.
That doesn't have another voice. Can be, sometimes you'll see like you get a drop in an MTV show and it'll have the artist name in the lower left hand corner, and maybe you can follow up and see where some of their material is living. But for the most part, 99% of TV commercials, TV is all instrumental music. So if you're a singer who's out there, I'd say definitely start trying to demo with some of these companies that are out there. I would say it's probably a good idea to collaborate with as many people as possible, and understand that the music business is crazy and you just have to keep on swinging the bat. So if there's like some really hot producers out there that you're feeling, maybe take like the top 100 and just like DM them all. I'm very much from that Gary Vee approach, like have no shame, even if they they don't get back to you or they're not interested now, that doesn't mean they're not going to be interested in a year from now. So just stay on their mind, keep hitting people up. And that's not only for producers that you're interested, like music producers, but also the same companies. There's like keep a list of all the music houses that you're hitting, all the music publishers that you're hitting, all the types of companies where you might have an avenue as a composer instrumentalist. If you're a singer trying to place your tracks in these same locations, hit people up monthly. However you keep tabs on people. For me, I keep it in an Excel document, and just stay persistent, because sometimes it's really just about right place, right time. Again, there's no rule that this is going to work, but just because it hasn't worked before doesn't mean it won't work the next time.
So then it's funny, like you're like, just because it hasn't worked before doesn't mean that it won't work the next time. But what happens if, so you do all that, you write down everything, you get it in an Excel sheet, you're reaching out to everybody, you're creating a bunch of content, and a year passes by and no one's picked up any of your music?
I'd say it depends on how important it is to you to make a career out of music and music alone. Like we just had a conversation with somebody tonight who has a day job, and they have their music as, I wouldn't even say their side hustle. They just do music on the side, and that's perfectly fine for them, and that satisfies their need to express themselves in a creative way. And there's a lot of, and in terms of music or in terms of any kind of creative outlet, this struggle is not limited to music alone. I mean, there's actors out there, there's poets, there's writers that are going through the same struggle. I have friends, they've been doing their acting thing or their writing thing in Hollywood for years, and they have a side gig. The side gig, maybe it's, Uber, maybe it's, being a bartender. Some people it's, maybe they're, assisting a bigger writer. before they sell their screenplay somewhere. So, there's no rule again that's saying that this is how long it takes, but you certainly won't find out by putting your music nowhere or taking no opportunities to put yourself out there and collaborate with the kinds of companies that I mentioned.
So what's been like a driving force for you individually to keep doing this? Like, how long have you been doing this for now? Like, from when you first started producing?
So I've been doing this 18 years, producing tracks, just creating, music of all kinds. And then I would say this is now coming up on my 8th year full time in just music and nothing else.
What's giving you that, like, that hunger? Because you're like, oh, well, you could have this other thing in side hustle and that could fulfill the need for it. So a big thing, a theme that is common for anyone who follows me on Instagram or is has been to a school talk or anything is just like understanding what your goals are. And for me, it was like I couldn't do anything else but this, which is why, like, even when I've had pockets where it's been really hard or things have been really slow, I still can't stop, because there's like this thing. Is it like that for you where you're just like, it's like a drug to some degree?
It is like a drug. For me, I think what definitely dragged me into this field, I caught the bug being a studio rat. I love the process of creating tracks, and then I loved people's reactions, making them move. When I was in 3rd grade, I remember, like, I had friends that were like, oh, come on, Ryan, let's play Spin the Bottle. And I was just, like, interested in changing the tapes in the tape deck. Like, oh, let me go from Gangster's Paradise to 1, 2, 3, 4, like, shout out to Coolio. Like, that wasn't any, yeah, he had it for a minute. And when I got into college and started really focusing on the business of music, I realized that I love the hunt and the hustle as much as I love the creative part of it. But I can't, there are people I know that do both well. You kind of told that line as well. That, like, one side of them, they're very good in the studio, they have good creative instincts, artistic abilities. And then at the same time, they're good at selling themselves. Some people are really, really good at selling themselves, and they should just be a manager, or they should just be, in the business end, on the business end, in some capacity or other. And then there's some people that should just be studio rats and just, like, have somebody out there, hustling their tracks for them, or depending upon what they do. But in 2018, you have to have a little bit of both of them. Maybe you are like 90% artist, 10% business. But that business, because at some point you got, even like if you have a manager, if you're an artist, you're really creative, and you have a manager, you still have to call the manager back. You
Right.
still have to come to the meeting and show up to the things that he sets up for you. And if you're vice versa, if you're really good at business, but at the same time, you're producing tracks, and they're just not up to par. Like, it's just not going to work out. Or you have to represent the artist who is good at that sort of thing. Like, so there has to be some part of what you're doing or what you're representing has to be a combination of both business and creative.
And do you think that you're driven by more of the creative or more of the business?
It's difficult to say,
Well, let's take money out of it, right? Like, let's take money completely out of that, and it's just about the process of creating or the hustle.
Yeah, I mean, I struggle with this one a lot. And I'm going to say hustle, because I left a career in accounting to create music for a living, right? So there's some part of me that is like, I don't want to do this accounting thing, right? I want to be creative. I want to be in the studio. I love the process of making tracks. It's what I know how to do. But ultimately, whether you are a doctor, a lawyer, and you start your own accounting firm, you start your own jewelry business, you think you're going into this thing where, like, oh, I'm leaving my job and I'm starting my own business, and you're gonna do that thing. You're gonna make your jewelry. You're gonna process your tax returns. You're gonna, give people legal advice. And 80% of what you're doing is selling the thing that you left your job for.
Right.
So, like, that's why I say the hustle is the drive, and the creative gives me that feeling of satisfaction. But there is something about working 80 hours a week so I don't have to work 40 for somebody else.
Right. So do you think that, and it's funny because I have my own feelings about this, but I'm curious about yours.
Well, let me hear your comment. I'm going to throw the question back to you.
All right. Well, I mean,
so like
I
go ahead.
enjoy, it's becoming apparent to me now. I think I always told myself that, like, I love to make the music, and I love, like, because I do, like, I do genuinely really get lost in the process of like creating, and like that magic that happens, like when you start with nothing and then something is there for you. Like it's so magical, it's amazing. But I do enjoy the hustle as well. Like, and it is becoming more and more apparent to me now as I'm expanding into other things. For instance, like podcasting. Like, as I expand into other things, or school tours, or speaking, and those things they're not music centric, and they still eat large portions of my time, and they require a lot of effort to get them off of the ground. And I'm like, well, why am I still putting this much work into this if it's not actually like just the process of creating music? And it's because I love that autonomy. I love the ability to say, like, this is mine, and I'm doing this for the reasons that are motivating me. And I think it's like some kind of like like masochistic to some degree. Like
100%.
Yeah, like where you're just like, no, I'm gonna do this. I almost feel like, for me personally, if it became easier, I would look for something that was harder. Like if all of a sudden, boom, like someone is gonna figure out where your shows are gonna come from. Someone is gonna figure out where your radio interviews are coming from, and if all of that is going, like, yes, your time would be occupied, but I think the drive behind that would kind of be gone. Like, I'd be like, oh well, what else do we do now? And I think the artists feel this way, and I can't speak for any of them, but I think that's why so many artists diversify, because it's not just because of money. It's not just because of money that Justin Timberlake opens a bar, or gets into an alcohol company, or then starts to do SNL, or like Rihanna starts a makeup company. Like, all that stuff doesn't happen. It's just, I think there's a need to be like, I have to be doing something else that's a challenge, that's hard. And I think to some degree, like, when you're in this element of the hustle, you kind of feed off of the challenge of being like, I can get that commercial spot, I can get that ad spot, I can do this, and then there's this affirmation that you get when you do. And that affirmation, I think when you're not doing it, sometimes that affirmation can feel like it's supposed to be monetary, but it doesn't have to be. I think that sometimes it's just the satisfaction of like, yeah, I did that. You gotta win. That's a W. And that's how it is for me, anyway.
Well, I have my own thoughts about, Rihanna and Justin Timberlake, and how they've been able to parlay their success in music into successes in other areas, partially because they're trying to keep up with a certain lifestyle after maybe commercial successes of their tracks haven't come through in the following album, and the albums following some of their what are regarded as their best work, right?
Right.
But like, let's even take the example of this magical, elusive catalog that you're chasing, or like the massive hit, right? The things that you and I would love.
Right.
You know, track heard everywhere, right? What happens? Take, you know, Gangnam Style for, I hate to use him as that because he's a creative, right? He's an artist like us. Mm-hmm. But like, massive worldwide hit. YouTube views out the ass. Radio play, TV appearances. I mean, anybody would love one of these on their, you know, resume.
This is what I've done, yeah.
Yeah, and then we always like, oh, and then it would be done. But then what, right? Like, then are you supposed to feel fulfilled for the rest of your career because of this one hit? No, like, you're constantly chasing, well, now I have this mark, I've got a hit. So anything that comes after that is going to be like subpar. Yeah. But that doesn't mean you're not going to go as hard. I mean, who knows? To be honest with you, I couldn't even tell you what he's up to.
Right. Maybe he's probably going hard.
Right. Maybe he worked twice as hard to get the second hit, and he had like some follow-ups that were like
right. I mean, he's got a great manager, Scooter
Braun, fantastic, great role model, great follow. You know, but let's say it wasn't even as big as that. Let's say it was, you know, a top 40 hit. You know, maybe something, a track that everybody knows. You know, like, and maybe you have a piece of it as a songwriter. It wasn't like, you know, massive hit, but big enough where, all right, your bills are okay for like half a year or a year. Once those checks start to come in, but that's a whole nother story. Like, you're still ultimately trying to get the next one, right? You're focused on the next thing, or how do I get from being a top 40 to a top 10, a top 10 to a number 1? Now I got to follow up my number 1 with 3 more number 1s.
Right.
So it really doesn't end with, you know, with just one. It's an insatiable desire to continue to create and beat what you've done. In part because, yeah, you got to eat, but also creatively, like.
But I think that's a breed of person. So I think if anyone is listening, I think it's important to be self-aware and just understand if you are that breed of person. I think sometimes some people, just about identifying your goals, that's not what they want. I think for some people it's just like, man, I just wanted to get on the radio. And that was the goal. So then as soon as you hit the radio, it's like, yo, I hit the radio. Like, I made it. I'm good. And then you kind of fall back. Or, yo, I hit Billboard Top 200. I made it. I'm good. I can fall back. You know, I think for some people, that's it. Like, that was the goal. Well, so they hit it, and then they feel complete, and it's just like, okay, cool, I'm done. And I think for the people who have that different kind of drive, that kind of edge, you're always trying. Like, all the time. You're always trying. I think about that with, like, I think a lot of times it happens with writers. Like where they're always trying to pen another hit. It's just like they're not in the limelight as much. But you still got people like Babyface still writing songs, still trying, you know, it's like, oh, well, look, I wrote all these hits in the 90s and, you know, for Mariah Carey and stuff, and they're still writing, still doing that. I think that it's just a little harder when you're the face. You know, if you're an artist or whatever, it's a little harder then, because people are like, oh, you're washed up, or your time is over, or you're too old now. And then you're kind of stuck doing your hits, right? You know, you're stuck doing the classics or the greatest of, but you're still trying. I just know a lot of people, and that's kind of what I'm saying is I see that in you, like where you're just like, no matter what, I already know that you're going to come like hard. That you're always going to like stay grinding. But I've definitely met people where I'm like, there's no grit there, or resilience even. And I think that sometimes resilience is one of those words that kind of gets confused, where it's like, if something bad happens to you, you're not resilient, so you can't keep going if something bad. Resilient also still has its same meaning when something good happens to you. do you have the resilience to take the win and keep go, and take the L that comes afterwards? Or can you take the win and be hungry to get another win? And that win doesn't have to be a better win. Getting another placement is still a win, whether it's a good placement or a bad placement, it's still a win, but do you have the drive to keep going after that? I think that is like resilience and grit. And I just think it's important to understand whether you have it or not. You're somebody who I definitely feel like you certainly have it. This kind of brings us back to the first question I was asking you, how did you stay? How many artists have you worked with that have disappeared along the way? You say you've been doing this for 18 years. So I know that you've been working with people along the way. How many people are still around?
Everybody but you and another artist by the name of Young Hoffman. So if I had to put a number on how many artists, I mean, hold on, let me think about that.
Pull out the calculator.
Let me say Axel Dagas Arendelles in Germany too. I'm not gonna say that he threw in the towel just yet, but let's just say it's less than 1%. Yeah.
Have the resilience.
And that doesn't always mean that they're making a living from this thing. It just means
doesn't have to, right?
It just means that they're still at it, and I mean, I think with whatever you do, if you're a ball player, if you're a doctor, if you're a musician, you're gonna have lows, you're gonna have highs, and good meditative practice is not to get too high about the highs and too low about the lows. Just kind of stay even, middle of the road. I don't think it's hard for me to say whether you can develop it over a period of time. I think that has to do with if your heart is in what you're doing, but at the same time your needs are being met. Because yes, we can all be creative till we're blue in the face, but are you paying your bills to your level of satisfaction, right? If it's not your level of satisfaction, are you getting your level of satisfaction in other ways? You can be a happy camper with a 9-to-5 job or a 9-to-9 job, as long as you're doing things outside of work. If work is not making you happy, then you're taking your 4 weeks vacation, and traveling the world or doing whatever it is. Or if you're a family person and you get to spend the time, with your family. I mean, that's important, and your spiritual needs are being met as well. If all of these things make sense, then I think you're primed in a position to be resilient. So, the answer is it depends.
It depends, right. It depends on the person. I think that you can always. I personally just feel like you can identify it in a person.
Sure.
You can just see, oh yeah, that person they're gonna stick through this. Now, I'm not saying that everybody needs to stick through it. I think sometimes you can easily get stuck and do something for too long when it's you should have quit by now. It's hey, if you have been trying to be a singer and only a singer for the last 5 years, and you've gone into debt, and you have no home life, and now you're depressed, and if all of these things are happening at some point, it's just now you're not being self-aware to understand. It's maybe you should try something different, or maybe you just need to re-up. I tell people all the time, it is a business. What we're doing is a business, and just like starting any kind of business, it's important for you to have capital. So I think a big mistake that you can make, a mistake that I personally made, which fortunately I was able to navigate my way around, but if I could go back, this is something that I would change, and that's not teaching for a year first, where I could have stacked away $30,000, and I would have had a nice cushion to navigate with. And I think that sometimes it's people jump into it quick. It's yo, I'm gonna be a producer, I'm gonna do this, and you jump in, and it's like, yo, where is this money going to come from? I still have bills. I got a car payment. I got rent. I have, electricity or gas or whatever it is. You have all these expenses. And then, I mean, for anybody who's listening who makes music, you already understand that it costs money to make music. The cost has gone down now in 2017, or 2018, but it still costs money to make music and to get it out or pay for ads or pay for promotion or have somebody come and shoot a video for you so you can then post that on Instagram. And it's like, are you just getting likes out of that? Like, are those likes paying you anything? Like, all of that factored in, like, that's not a good business model. That may not be sustainable. Do you agree? Like, do you think that it helped to have? I think you kind of know that it does help. I think everybody would know it helps to have capital. But how much do you think that has helped with your ability to remain resilient through the times that have been tough?
Oh yeah, 100%. If I didn't work those first 4 years in accounting, there would be a lot of things that I couldn't have done in that first year. I mean, I definitely took a few trips to Los Angeles to try and, meet with CBS, meet with other big production companies and agencies around the country to try and generate new material, new business, taking producers out to lunch, and not to say that you necessarily need to spend money in this kind of way to get their desired result, but you may need it for equipment. You may need it to, go to take a seminar. You may, have a bad month, and it's there. And before you really start to kick it into gear, and again, I think that's like, it's not only music, any kind of a business. If you're a lawyer, if you're an accountant, if you start a business, you shouldn't expect to see profitability until like year 2 or 3. I'm not like, it's not rocket science, but I think that's a good general rule. On the other hand, maybe you're somebody that can multitask. Maybe you can work a part-time job and you're cranking out music and you believe so much in your product, your first go around, and because you're young, 18, 19 years old, you've got so much energy that you're able to multitask and do 2 things at the same time, work that job and still make your music, go and shop it to the label, and go to, try and creative ways to market and make it pop. There's no rule. So, perhaps maybe some other people would have said, well, maybe instead of, working in accounting for those first 4 years, you could have been developing your craft. Those are, that's 40 hours a week, that's 2,000 hours a year that you could have been putting into being a musician. Yes, I do think that something was lost there, but ultimately I found a balance that made me,
That worked for you.
Maybe worked for me in the long run. Somebody else could be a different story.
Right. It's funny that you even say it like that, because I think I don't think that it was balance for me, but I think it was pressure for me. So what balance worked for you, and I believe it was pressure that worked for me. It was like, well, because I didn't have this, money to sit back on, and I had no choice but to be like, hey, look, I gotta figure this out, right now. I have to figure it out. And I think that was big for me. I tend to work better like that. Like, I certainly work better under pressure, where it's like, hey, look, this has to be done right now. And I think that when you're in that pocket of desperation, where it is a must and you have to figure it out, you do. I think you just do. Because if you don't, then you're homeless or starving or whatever. And even if you have to go through that period for a little bit of time, it either breaks you and you stay there, or you get out. I think that's what it is. It either works or it doesn't work. And for me, I'm like, yeah, when it hit me like that, where it was like, yo, what am I gonna do? It's like, oh, I have to make it work. Just quick before we go, what are just a few tips that you would have for anybody listening that wants to get into production or wants to get into music for advertising or licensing or anything like that? Just like some really quick things to be like, hey, look, this is what you need to do to get started if you wanted to start right after this podcast is over.
Sure. So I would say is number one, is your music ready for market? Is it ready to be out there in the world? Have you put in your 10,000? People say 10,000 hours. Have you put in your 5,000 hours? Some people are really good. They can jump the line. If you want to do music for picture, you got to have some examples of music for picture, music for video. So if you haven't already worked with a client, if you haven't already worked with an advertiser or have your music placed in a TV show, you got to fake it before you make it. So I would take some examples of ads or videos or TV shows or films that you really like and strip out the music. If it's unfortunate, you may also be stripping out the voiceover, but put your own score, put your own soundtrack in there, make the movements work where you're like, yes, this is what I would have done creatively, either from a genre perspective or just like your own stamp on things. Slap a little, label that says for demo purposes only, and go after that kind of work. If you want to do TV work, take 3 TV shows, do the same thing, and go after the music libraries. If you want to do advertising, if you want to do pharmaceutical work, take 3 pharmaceutical ads, put your own musical beds underneath it, and go after the music companies that are doing those sorts of things. And then, like I said, hit up the companies, the music houses, the music publishers, the music libraries, and hit them up once a month and really be persistent about it. And don't get discouraged if you don't hear a response back. And also don't write really long-winded email messages. Try to keep your messages to 1 to 2 sentences. Be the other person on the other side of the email. If you want to cut through the clutter, what's going to make you open their thing? Well, maybe you won't open it if you don't know who it is, but if you address the person by name, you put their name in the subject line with a little blurb about what it is, 1 to 2 sentences with the 1 piece of music, not 5 pieces of music, links over MP3s, you're more likely to get responses. And, rinse, repeat, cold cycle.
Cold cycle. So if anybody...
Warm cycle.
If anybody wanted to send music to you, whether that was to try to get it placed with the Qniverse or anything, where would they be able to send that music?
So if you're interested in placing music with our company, we're always looking for new material. You can reach me at ryan@knockitoutmusic.com. You could also find my information at knockitoutmusic.com. Or you can go directly to my partner site, the Qniverse, at www.theqniverse. That's www.theqniverse.com. I will also put a link in the podcast if anybody's interested.
Cool. Well, thank you again for being on the podcast, for giving everybody this great insight. I'm glad that I was able to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. Well, link.
Peace.
Simple.
All right.
I think they'll get a lot of insight in there. It's
Hopefully
probably like
that you're still running.
45, 50 minutes.
Ugh.